Okay, so we're reading from the Mara Nevuchim in Chelek Aleph, Perek Nun Daled. The pictures are in opposite order, so the last picture is first. You could just scroll down. When you're doing that. So Dak Rabban Shel Chachamim Moshe Rabbeinu Olav Shalom Bikesh Shtei Bakashos. He made two requests from God. Moshe he made two requests from God. Uvalo atshuva al shtei abakashos, and he received two different answers on both of these requests. Abakasha ha'achas hi shu bikesh mimenu yis'aleh shiodiu atzmo ve'amitoso. He requested from God to reveal his essence and his fundamental truth, the fundamental truth of God's being. Abakasha ha'shniya, and the second request, asher bikesh tchila hi shiodiu ta'arav, that he should make known his characteristics, God's characteristics. And this is what God answered him. First, he promised him that he would in fact reveal to him all of his characteristics, all of God's characteristics and actions. However, he told him that his essence is not graspable. However, he told him that what I will show you is the absolute maximum of what a human being is able to obtain or grasp. And what Moshe was revealed then, no one had received that before, no one had conceived of that before, and no one will conceive of that level after him. Meaning this was Moshe's highest level of prophecy. So this is referring to the interaction between Moshe Rabbeinu and God at Har Sinai after the Ego, where Moshe he succeeds in obtaining the forgiveness of the Jewish people for the sin of the golden calf, and then he sees that he's on a roll, so he asks some more requests. So first he says Horeini na es drachecha, that's the ta'arav u'pilosav, the characteristics and his actions. And then he asks, Hareini nas kvodecha. And he goes a step up and he says, show me your glory. So God says, okay, my drachim I can tell you, but my kavod I can't tell you. Right? Lo tuchal liros es panai, you can't see my face. Ki lo yirani ha'adam v'chai, because no man can see my face. Malamed el hoyoso, and by the way, we're skipping to all the underlined sections. We don't have to read the whole thing. Every section that's underlined, that's what we're reading. Malamed al hayoser yis'ala noda b'tarav she'im yoda hadrachim yodi'eu. What this is teaching us is that someone who knows the actions and the ways of God is what it's called to know God. When we say to know God, that's what it means, to know his actions and his characteristics. That's what Moshe said, in order so that I can find favor before you. Malamed kimishi yodeas Hashem hu asher yimtzachen be'einav. Someone who knows God's characteristics, that is who God finds favor in, or that is the person that finds favor in God's eyes. If someone who wants to find favor in God's eyes, to have chen, then he has to delve into and conceive and perceive as much as possible God's characteristics. So the next request that he tried to do a level up, so to speak, after the drachim, he asked, Hareini nas kvodecha, show me your kavod. Lama shehitziv lefanav kol hanimtzaim she'aleim ne'emar vayar Elohim es kol asher asa v'hinei tov me'od. God says to Moshe, he says, Ani avir kol tuvi al panecha. I will bring before you all of my good. I will pass before you all of my good. That's what we say, right? In Nusach Sfarad, by every before Nefilas Hapayim in Shachris and Mincha. So it's the custom to say Vidoy, and this is the introductory verse. Vayavor Hashem al panav. Vayavor, he passed before him, and he tells him, Ani avir. What is it that I am passing before you? Kol tuvi, all of my goodness. What does that mean? Kol tuvi. What is all of God's goodness that he's passing before him? So says the Rambam, Kol hanimtzaim, all of that which is in existence. Shalem ne'emar, vayar Elohim es kol asher asa v'hinei tov me'od. That's God's good. God's good is the creation, because it says repeatedly over and over in creation, vayar Elohim es kol asher asa v'hinei tov, and it was good. So when it says that Moshe sees this vision of God passing before him all of his good, he's given a panoramic view of the entire cosmos. of the lowest coral reefs under the ocean to the Andromeda galaxy. The entire creation is passed before him. Kavanasi, and my intention, says the Rambam, not just the actual individual creations. He's not just given, right, a download of the encyclopedia. Rather, bihitzavsam lefonav shiasig tiveim, their natures, v'kishreim zeh bazeh, and their interconnectivity. Sha'az yeda hanhagaso osam. That through that he will know how God guides them and keeps them in order and nurtures them. He'achi haklal v'haprat, in the general sense and in the individual sense, meaning at the species level, but yes, meaning however level up you want to say it, right? In the general sense, the categorical sense, and the individual sense. And that's what we see later on in the Torah in Sefer Bamidbar, when God describes the uniqueness of Moshe's prophecy. It says that he is every area of my house is open to him. Every area of God's house is open to Moshe. Meaning Moshe sees the full expanse of the cosmos, and he sees the interconnectivity of every creature and how I maintain that network and interconnectivity.
Is that what Moshe was asking for? I want to see all your creatures from the lowest to the highest and how they work and interact.
This was the but this is the introduction.
Okay.
That's the introduction to what God is going to show him, which is the request. So what's the next line? The kotzarbi is hiro sholosh esrei midos halalu, and this is the condensation of these 13 attributes. What Chazal call in the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah the sholosh esrei midos harachamim, the 13 attributes of mercy. Although in the Torah that term doesn't appear. That's what Chazal call them. Va'af al pi shehisig kol tuvo, klomer kol pa'alav. After he experienced the full expanse of God's actions, ki elehem hapulos habos mitzido yis'ala legabe himtzos b'nei adam b'hanagasam. Because these 13 attributes is how God interacts with the world. So basically what's going on, Moshe is first given this panoramic view of all of creation, of every single creature, the interconnectivity of all creatures, and he sees what God is producing. What is God producing? He's producing this incredibly complex world, and he's sustaining it and maintaining it and nurturing it. And then after he sees that, God makes explicit, these are the attributes that I'm using in order to maintain this creation. Right? Keil, Rachum, V'chanun, Erech HaPayim, V'rav Chesed, etc.
But he gave him the
so
key
that's the
after
answer.
He showed him the whole box.
So I think this is how you have to visualize it. So Moshe is saying, explain to me your characteristics. So God just didn't write down a description of himself as if, right, he's writing the God profile. Like tell me a little bit about yourself. He's showing him literally what God does. Right? He's showing him a face-to-face visual of what God is doing, and then he makes explicit in terminology what those attributes are that's keeping this whole system going. Yeah. So he delivers it to him in the most fundamental way possible.
Moshe presumably can make a connection, which I guess is not obvious to us, between the 13 midos and the world, the creations of all ecosystem of the world. That connection he has to see, or else he's not getting.
So that's the idea. The 13 attributes of mercy are the full description of what rachamim means. If Chazal are saying that these are the 13 attributes of mercy, that means this is a full description of what mercy in action looks like. It's true that rachamim itself is one of those attributes, right? Because rachamim is on that list of the 13 attributes. But in general, the rachamim can be broken down and described in these 13 ways. There's the element of patience. There's the element of kindness. There's the element of justice, even, right? Emes is on there. Truth, right? Truth is a demanding principle, right? So it's not just all loving and niceness. There are elements that are more demanding and more strict there. So the 13.
Somehow that makes it a 3D dimensional picture of the world. I mean, there's still some connection that I don't think there's.
It's kind of like if you see a Carl Sagan, pictorial, journey of the universe. So it could be very visually impressive, but if it's not explained to you, you're kind of missing something. So first you see the visual description. It's literally a prophetic vision. He's showing him this prophetic vision, and then God is explaining to him explicitly what the dynamics are behind this whole thing that he's seeing. So he's seeing both. He's seeing the vision, Kol Tuvi Al Banecha, and then he hears the Shalosh Esrei Midos, which is the description of how it's.
But I don't. Do you think? Do we understand? If we saw that, what he saw, would we then intuitively understand a list of 13 midos, its connection, how that is really the sort of operating system of this whole thing I saw? Or is that something that Moshe was privileged that we can't even? We don't even see that. I personally do not see that connection.
You're saying that, right? You're saying I think that is the hasaga that's being talked about. That is the conceiving that's made possible by the prophecy, right? In Achanami.
Right, but that he got, but we're not privileged to have a clue as to what the connection is.
Well, I don't know if it means we don't have a clue. It means that we don't have the same level that Moshe grasped. But it's written down in the Torah so that we can take a lesson from it. Right?
Okay. But we have a very basic.
We have a very constricted understanding in comparison to what Moshe Rabbeinu had an understanding. That doesn't mean that the understanding is valueless. It means that
I don't know if that's the right essay.
Huh?
I don't know if I put down my pen and say, I give up. What's that?
I think it's to keep the goal in front of you and to realize theoretically it's attainable. Theoretically.
It is only if God is giving you that. And if God isn't giving you
Right,
the
right,
said no one
right.
else is
So that's
getting
why we-
that. No one else did, ever will, or ever will. So we're not going to get that. We're not going to get that, right?
You're bringing up a good point. This is a more general point of if the information that we're receiving, it was given by the Creator through prophecy, then what is the relationship between that information and us who are not receiving it through prophecy? We're receiving it just through reading it and trying to process it with our minds and hearts. Right? It's not a prophetic experience. That's a good question. Right? It's like I think that when you read words of prophecy, so you do tap into the you do tap into the state of consciousness that the person was in at the time, which is why it's very important to read, right? Like the Gemara in Eruvin says from the pasuk in Mishlei, Motzaehem Motza Chayim, that those who find them, meaning words of wisdom, have found life. So the Gemara in Eruvin Darshans, I believe this is on Daf Nun Vav, but don't quote me on that. It says Motzaehem b'motzi b'fiem, those who enunciate them. There's an idea of enunciating the words of Torah, not just reading it visually. Like when you're reading and when you're learning Torah, to enunciate the words. Why is that? Because enunciating those words that were said from that level of inspiration, it has an impact on your mind. Because those are words of prophecy. So even though you're not experiencing prophecy, you're uttering words of prophecy. And that's already an access point that you wouldn't already have. So just thinking about it in your mind, okay, that's also nice, but you want to get as much of yourself into it as possible. So it's true, we're not experiencing prophecy, but we are able to, this kind of goes into what the Gemara talks about, Chacham Adif Minavi, that there's a side of the one who studies these words, that he has an advantage over the prophet himself. Chazal also say that, but this is getting a little bit far afield. But the point is that no, it's not. The fact that we're not receiving it in prophecy doesn't negate the importance of it. We have access. We have an access point to delve into and understand the message that's trying to be told, and it could be that we even have an advantage because we're able to be outside observers and attack it and analyze it from an objective point of view, as opposed to this overwhelming subjective experience that the prophets had. We see that sometimes there are prophets that mistakenly interpreted their own prophecies, right? I think we've talked about that in other contexts, right? It could be that a prophet has the wrong interpretation of their own prophecy, and that later generations of scholars analyzing them, they had the correct interpretation.
Is there any sefer where they will particularly focus on this task? I'm going to take 13 midos. I'm going to take this vision that I know Moshe got and try to marry them together. And
yes, it's called the Midrashim. No, I'm not joking.
Okay.
No, I'm saying why this is really going far afield. But if we're already here, where does that term come from? Midrash. We have all these books, right? This Midrash, that Midrash, Midrash Tanchuma, Midrash Rabbah, Midrash this, Midrash that. Where does that come from? That's actually a term in the Tanakh, right? We find that the Nevi'im had books, private books that they wrote, called midrashim. There's an example in Divrei Hayamim called Midrash Ido. Ido was one of the Nevi'im in the time of David HaMelech, right? Gad, Natan, Ido. Right? I believe it was in the generation of David. So anyway, it says that there was this book called Midrash Ido. So the Mefarshim explain what was this Midrash Ido. It means that when he had prophetic experiences, he would sit down and think about it and try to contemplate and understand what the significance of those visions were. And that was the book. It was called Midrash. We have this word Midrash for us is like a certain connotation. It means like either a drasha, someone gets up and gives a speech, or it means a drasha like in a halachic connotation, like extracting laws from the psukim. But in the strict sense, and really what it meant for people living in the time of the Tanakh, what it meant was exactly what it means literally. Lidrosh means to seek out. Right? So when Chazal gave the name of the book Midrash Rabbah, but it's a very powerful and epic title, right? The Great Seeking. Like that's a powerful title, right? Midrash Tanchuma means the seekings that took place in the Beit Midrash of Tanchuma, Chacham who lived 1600 years ago in the north of Israel. Right? It's like the seekings. That's what it was. They sat in front of psukim and they delved into them and they contemplated them and they tried to understand what exactly is the state of mind and the prophetic messages that are trying to be communicated and are embedded in these words. That's what they tried to do, and those midrashim are not necessarily accessible to the prophet, as it says. This for sure we've quoted. I forget exactly when. The Gemara in Baba Basra says right. It talks about the people. Talks about the experience at the splitting of the sea. Misnabim ve'enam yodim ma misnabim. They're prophesying. They don't even know what it is that they're saying. Right? They say, right. The example is it says tiviema v'titaema bahar nachalascha, which means they will be brought and established in the land. They will be brought, but not us, because that generation wouldn't make it. Right? They were like prophesying about themselves unknowingly that they wouldn't make it to the land. Right? So very often the prophet doesn't even know what he's saying, and it takes midrashim, it takes the chacham to sit and be doresh, right? To fully unpack the significance of what's being said. All this has absolutely nothing to do with Kdamא Va'azlã. Nothing to do with it. But listen, there's a machlokes between Chachamim and Rabbi Meir. It's brought about what type of questions you're allowed to ask in the Beit Midrash. So Rabbi Meir says, what do you mean? What type of question? You can ask any question you want. And Chachamim said, no, stick to the Masechta that the people are learning and ask that like those are the questions, right? The whole thing shloshim yom kodem l'chag. Right? We talk about 30 days before the chag. What that primarily means, the Ran, the Maseches Megillah says, like what that primarily means is that 30 days before the chag, in the Beit Midrash, you can start asking questions about that. It's not considered going off topic. 30 days before Pesach, it's like this is the topic because we're getting to Pesach. So like this is by definition the topic that we're dealing with. It doesn't matter if you're learning Baba Kama or Kedushin or Ksubas, it doesn't matter, right? This is the topic at hand. So you're allowed to start asking questions about that. Yeah, but Rabbi Meir says, what do you mean? Like, I don't care. Like, who cares what book you happen to have in front of you? Like, just whatever question happens to come up. That's the question that you ask. Okay, so for the time being, we can pass them like a das yachid and. So, okay, let's see how much we can do in the remaining time of here. Kdamã Va'azlã. So I'm just warning everyone now. And this has been an increasingly difficult thing in the recent ta'amim that we're going through. That there's a lot of waxing poetic, even more than typical for Rav Kook, and it's sometimes difficult to understand what exactly each additional sentence or phrase is adding on to the general theme. So even though you can certainly extract a theme and you can extract specific messages that he's trying to hone in on, however, there's a lot of text for each tam. There's just a lot of poetic text. So we're going to do our best to try to get through it, even if we could just understand the literal meaning of these words that Rav Kook is literally making up as he goes. I mean, we're not even like he's literally making up these words. Right? We've talked about this, that he contributed a lot to the modern Hebrew language that we have today. So we're going to do our best. So Kdamã Va'azlã. Kdamã Va'azlã literally means to get up and go. To get up and go. And just to clarify, the point that I wanted to bring out from this, the point that I wanted to bring here is that the thing that characterizes our relationship to Elokus is a double motion This is sometimes called Chachma Ilah, sometimes it's called Ratzav Ashov. It goes by different names. But the fundamental dynamic that undergirds any spiritual inspiration is the inspiration, the pull to go to a higher place, and then the inevitable pullback that takes place as a function of our finite nature. All inspiration is by definition infinite. It's infinite. You just want to go and not stop going up. But what happens inevitably is a shov movement, right? A going back movement, which is a function of the fact that we're finite beings. So the Kdamah Va'azla is embodying that literally in its symbolism, right? It's like the one. It's two little symbols, right? Kdamah Va'azla, right? To get up and go, but it's characterized by the one movement in the forward direction and then one movement in the back direction. And we see by Moshe Rabbeinu. I wanted to do the follow up very quickly. Here, I'm sorry. The follow up in the Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer says an interesting thing about the relationship between these two bakashot. One was Moshe's desire to know God's ways, and one was his desire to know God's essence. So says the Midrash, of Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, Amar LaKadosh Baruch Hu, Moshe, Ein ata yochel liros es kvodi. You can't see my glory. The glory, my essence, as the Rambam explained, you can't see. Shelo tamus, because if you see it, you're going to die. Shenemar ki lo yirani ha'adam v'chai. El leman ha'shavua shenishbati lecha, for the sake of the oath that I had sworn to you, right, referring to the oath that he swore that I will make my prophecy unique to the Jewish people alone, I will show you. I will pass before you all the servants that serve me. Right, this is kind of like what the Rambam explained. All the different creatures and throughout the whole cosmos. And when you see this, don't worry, don't be afraid, because I'm going to protect you, right? That's what he says, V'sakosi lecha es kapi ad avri, and I'm going to cover you with my hand until I pass over. So basically, what is the Midrash saying? Midrash is saying that Moshe was aiming for this really, really high thing, to know God, to see God's kavod, to see God's essence. And what God did basically was that he gave him a replacement for that. He says, the kavod you can't have, because it's not possible. It's not possible for a human being to see and to know God's essence. But I'm going to back you up just a little bit to the maximum that you can go. So this was Moshe's Kdamah Va'azla. This was Moshe's I want to see God's kavod. And God to push it back. Lo yirani ha'adam v'chai. No one can see me and live. You have to just a little bit, just push back a little bit. And I will push before, and I will pass before you, rather, kol tuvi al panecha, all my goodness before you. So this is the embodiment of Kdamah Va'azla, the infinite inspiration, and then having to back up a little bit because we are finite and have to maintain that finitude. But is the sorry?
In that story, is there a Kdamah Va'azla?
I don't know if in that particular story there is, but we're going to take an example from this week's parsha. This is which I think is more relevant just because it's this week's parsha. Okay, so we're going to try to go through this as quickly as possible since it's already very late. When the loftiness shows itself, it reveals itself before the soul. And it spreads its light over all that are standing outside of it, meaning the infinite light is showing itself to all of the creatures that are finite. The internal realization comes forth, which uplifts the sense of self of the one who seeks, the one who is yearning. And this panoramic view of the loftiness is shown. Imagining what it could be to be satiated from a spiritual perspective. Meaning all these things are increasing the person's yearning. The ability to grasp the eternal light that has no boundaries. And there is a burning desire, to be on a constant upward progression. Constantly moving up with steps that never end, upwards, on the ladder of wholeness, in order to see the lofty divine face. in order to see the divine face. V'shifat or kodesh mirom olumei ha'adanim choderet b'neshama pnima, and this inspiration of holiness, it protrudes the whole soul, it permeates rather the whole soul. V'oseit rishuma kadmã ואזלא, and its imprint is this energy of kadmã ואזלא, of get up and go. Like I want to get up and go. I'm inspired. K'sha'asigu v'elyon, I feel like this is just a. Is this just a copy of the last couple of lines? It looks like just a, yeah. Hold on, where does it stop? Kadmã ואזלא. Right. So if you see on the it's very strange. If you see on the last word of the line, it's like 10, 12 lines down. The last word is azla. Ve'azlã, right? Yeah. So from there it starts again. Yeah. Hitkadmut v'halicha bilti poseket. Mahut ha'iloi, the essence of this ascent. Hata'anug ha'adin shel tosefet hatadirit. The delight of the continual progression. Shasham megia raz hayitzira. From there is a secret of creation. Kula b'chavyon ha'oz ha'eloi, hidden in the divine splendor. Hatochein shel ha'aliyah, the subject matter of this ascent. Shel ha'osafa, of the progress, of the addition. Shel ha'frayat or b'tosefet koach, of the constant adding of strength. Bi'iloi achrei iloi, of ascent after ascent. Zeu hatochen shahayotzer chok bi'itzurav. This is the content in which the Creator established in all of His creatures. Zel haraz, this is the secret. She'olamim kulam nikreim li tavot, that all of the created beings are being called to embody. Laman hutzi el hapoel, et haraz shel hatosefet, the secret of constant progress and constant addition. Shel habracha ha'olechet, of the ever increasing blessing. Hamitgaber k'ma'ayan hamitgaber, like a flowing stream. Zoti amatara shaharomemut habilti gvulit shama bishvila gvulim v'chukim. It is specifically for this infinite inspiration that wants to constantly go up and never stop making progress and constantly go up on this ladder of ascent. It's specifically for that the gvulim, that the boundaries have been created. The ha'meromim ha'ein sofim holchim u'mitgalim b'tosefet ein sofit. And the constant ascent keeps on going, b'tzidat ha'aliyah, with steps upward. Shelo yeshum efsharut liot eden elyon zeh mitzuyar ba'ashlemut ha'mechuyava, with the recognition that there is going to be no end to the shlemut, to that process of wholeness. Meaning, however high you go, it's never going to be a sense of complete wholeness. Okay, so now I can stop. That's never going to happen. Which will be definite from its awareness and sense of self. However, despite this, the pleasantness of that gvul, of that finite being, will not lack. Meaning, it's by design that there will never be a place of full satiation and, okay, now I'm good, now I can stop.
Because
what?
This is counterintuitive.
It's counterintuitive.
Normally, when you have a goal and you know you're not going to make it, you usually psychologically feel down, feel
correct.
lost. But
correct.
Here, God is telling him, and that's the nasier, and that's the shtickle ruach hakodesh in it. So that's how it's pronounced in other word.
Yeah.
That this is a matana from Hashem, that you're going to know you can't reach it, but you're going to feel satiated.
Right. So I agree with you, and I would say that on the basis of what you're saying, you can even redefine the so-called goal. Like a person sits down to eat, so the goal is to be satiated at the end of the eating. Like that's clearly the goal. It would be very frustrating if a person ate and like didn't feel satiated. That wouldn't be pleasant. However, if a person approaches something knowing that there is no end point, and therefore the end point can't be the goal. So it's not from the outset that there is no endpoint goal. The goal is to be in the process. Right? It's like the very end of Maseches Moed Katan says, Talmidei Chachamim, and we quoted this in the last discussion on Munach Revi'i, if I'm not mistaken. Talmidei Chachamim ein lehem menucha leolam. Torah scholars have no rest forever. As it says in the Pasuk in Tehillim, Perek Pei Dalet, if I'm not mistaken, Yelchu mechayil el chayil, You will go from valor to valor. Yira'eh el Elohim b'Tzion, and you will be seen before God's face in Zion. So the experience of the Talmidei Chachamim is literally like a reliving of the Moshe Rabbeinu experience. They're moving forward to see God's face in Zion. That's where they're going, and they're constantly going. Like they're just going, and there's never a time that, okay, I'm good now I can stop. No, they're just constantly progressing closer and closer and closer toward the Pnei Elohim b'Tzion, before the divine face. So the goal is not to reach an endpoint. The goal is to be on that ascent. Yeah, and it's the function of our finitude. The primary function of our finitude, says Rav Kook, is so that we can be in that constant moving forward. So that we can be in that process. If we were infinite, right, then there would be no perpetual process that we could be experiencing.
Moshe basically said, "I'll take what I can get." Moshe basically said, "I'll take what I can get. And whatever you're willing to show me, because you're already going beyond.
No
and you're already going beyond what anybody else will ever experience. So go ahead, turn on the movie. I'll just take whatever I."
I'll tell you even more interesting. What is so unique about this discussion is that a few lines before it says that Moshe Rabbeinu was unique in his prophecy because, right, Vayidaber Moshe el ha'Elohim panim el panim ka'asher yidaber ish el re'ehu. Moshe spoke to God face to face like a man speaks to his friend. That was 2 lines before. That was the description of Moshe while he was on the mountain receiving the luchos. And then he has to go down and deal with the egel business, and then he makes this request from God, show me your glory. What does God say? Lo tuchal liros es panai. You can't see my face. 3 seconds ago he said that Moshe is unique because he sees God face to face. Right? So there has to be different versions of what it means to see God face to face. And I think this is the definition. The seeing God's face that Moshe wanted to see was the end point. It was the omega. Like, just show me the truth, like the full essence of the divine mahut. Just show me the whole picture. And God said that you can't see. That you can't see. But you can be in this place of panai where you're communing where you're locked into this ever increasing and ever progressing ascent. That you can experience. And Rachamim, by definition, is a process, right? Like that is the thing that he's being shown. He's being shown the process of the creation in motion, right? The interconnectivity of the world in motion, right? The ultimate, right, physical and spiritual ecosystem in which God created. So that being aware of that perpetual process is what Moshe was shown.
So could you back up and say that even when 2 people are speaking panim el panim, they're actually never reaching. They're also never reaching the final.
So that is supposed to be modeled. The sweetness of any person-to-person interaction is supposed to be that when you're interacting, you feel this sense of that you're moving closer and closer towards the person. Even though there's no end point, there's no end. It's like, oh, I've had enough of this person now. If you reach that point, then it's not so pleasant to get to a point where it's like, I've had enough. I get it. I got the person. There's nothing else to see. I'm good, right? When you reach that point, we call that being annoyed. That's what that's what it means, right? But when you're in a face-to-face encounter with someone that's inspiring, that has depth. So every interaction is the sense of moving closer and closer, even though there's no end point in sight. There is no end point. By definition, there is no end point.
So the interesting thing is that if Moshe had that experience at Sinai, what were the next 40 years like for him? Revelation.
As Chazal tell us that Moshe didn't experience prophecy for all those years. After the Meraglim, Moshe did not experience prophecy until the very end of the story. Yeah.
So he didn't keep on going upwards.
So as we said before, it's like there is was he like locked into that state?
Right, instead of that
I hear you.
asymptote
He wasn't
Right.
bored for the rest of his
experience.
life.
I hope not. But like as we were saying in the beginning of this conversation, that there's the prophetic experience itself, and then there's all the time and reflection that's needed. There's the drisha, there's the midrash that's required, right? That's what I want to read. I want to read Moshe's Midrashim on the Sholosh Esrei Midos HaRachamim. That's what I want to read. Yeah, where's that book?
It's right here.
It's some what?
It's the Chumash.
Yeah.
It's Dvorim.
It's a major shot.
But I want his private notes. I don't want what was published. I don't want the edited version. I want what was what the publisher didn't add in. Okay, so we're a little bit over time, but
Over here complaining.
I just
We don't have a minyan anyway.
we don't have a minute anyway. So why don't we do these two quickly
They ask for Mara.
because
He's got a question.
How does the gvul become ein gvuli at the end?
it doesn't become ein gvuli. It remains gvul. That's the whole point. It remains gvul in order so that it can be locked into this process perpetually. It's the oneg, the delight that the finite being experiences of being on this constant upward journey is the ultimate oneg. It's like Rav Kook talks about in other places, right? The shleimut and the hishtalmut. Right? The shleimut, the ultimate wholeness, is only experienced by God. The hishtalmut, the experience of going up and up and up and constantly refining and constantly making more and more whole, is something that we experience. And the only way to experience that is that if we're finite. So remaining finite is the blessing, so to speak, that allows us to be in the perpetual process of hishtalmut. Sha'ashuim. Yeah. Yes.
ועדן הגבול הולך לגמור, לאין קץ בגבול.
Ein kates
ועדן
begvul.
הגבול הולך לגמור, לאין קץ בגבול, מדמה למקורו.
So what's the ein kates? The ein kates is that there's no end to that experience of constant progression. That's what that means. But from the sense of self, the self never reaches a point of sviyah, of